Have you ever noticed how some people speak English so naturally, like they were born doing it, while you're still translating every word in your head before speaking? If you've ever felt frustrated because English stays locked in your textbooks but never flows in real conversations, you're not alone. But here's something you should know. It doesn't have to be this way. Today I'm sharing how you can break the translation habit and start thinking directly in English. Let's unlock your true language potential right now. Hello, friends. Welcome to Native Explorer. Today we're talking about something that can completely change your English: learning to think in English. If you've ever felt stuck translating everything from your native language first, I understand your struggle. So many learners face this same problem. But I have good news. You can overcome this, and it won't take years. With the right methods, you can start thinking in English much sooner than you imagine. Chapter 1. Why translation holds you back. Have you ever wondered what makes native speakers different from language learners? It's not that natives know every word or grammar rule. The real difference is they think directly in English. When we constantly translate from our first language, we create a mental barrier that slows everything down. Picture this. You're having a conversation, and your brain is working double time, first thinking in your language, then translating to English, then speaking. No wonder it feels exhausting. That's not how fluency works. Let me tell you a secret that might surprise you. Small shifts in your thinking patterns can create massive improvements in your speaking. You don't need to memorize 1,000 new words or perfect every grammar rule. You just need to train your brain to think differently. So what's the first step? Breaking the translation habit. If you can't stop translating in your head, you'll always speak with hesitation. But don't worry, translation isn't a habit you're born with. It's something you can change. And I'll show you exactly how. Here's the truth. Anyone can learn to think in English, regardless of their current level. If English has always felt like a foreign code in your brain, this video is especially for you. We'll break down the process into simple techniques you can start using today. By the end, you'll be processing English more naturally than ever before. But first, let's understand why thinking in English matters so much. When you think directly in English, you respond faster, speak more naturally, and feel the language rather than just knowing it. Each time you practice thinking in English, you're creating new neural pathways that make fluency possible. I love this quote from Ludwig Wittgenstein. "The limits of my language are the limits of my world." When you learn to think in a new language, you actually expand your world. Now, I know what you're wondering. But what if I can't think in English yet? Don't worry, that's completely normal. Thinking in a new language is a skill that develops with practice. Let me give you a simple challenge to start. Try to name 5 objects around you right now directly in English. Don't think of the word in your language first, just look and name. This tiny exercise begins training your brain for direct English thinking. In the next chapters, we'll explore proven techniques to help you think in English naturally. We'll cover visualization, association, inner monologue, and even some fun mental games. Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. But there's one technique that will jumpstart your ability to think in English. It's something most learners never try, but it's the key to making faster progress than you ever thought possible. Chapter 2. The power of visual thinking. Now that we've talked about breaking the translation habit, let's explore the first powerful technique that will help you think directly in English: visual thinking. Most people believe language learning is about words and grammar. But here's the truth. Thinking in English starts with images, not words. When you connect English directly to images and concepts instead of to your native language words, you build a foundation for natural English thinking. Think about this. When a native English speaker sees a dog, they don't think dog in another language first. They simply connect the image directly to the English word. This instant connection is what we want to develop in your brain. But how do you build these direct connections? You need to practice visual association. This means linking English words directly to images, feelings, and experiences, bypassing your native language completely. Here's a simple way to practice. Look at everyday objects around you and say their names in English without translating. See a chair? Just think chair, not the word in your language first. It might feel strange at first, but this is how we begin rewiring your brain. One effective method for visual thinking is the picture dictionary technique. Instead of traditional dictionaries that translate from one language to another, use image-based resources that connect English words directly to pictures. This trains your brain to make direct English associations. Here's how you can practice visual thinking. 1. Surround yourself with labeled images. Put English labels on household items. When you see the item, you'll automatically see its English name too. 2. Browse picture books or visual dictionaries. These connect images directly to English words, bypassing translation. 3. Practice image-word association. Look at pictures and describe what you see directly in English. Start simple with single objects, then work up to complex scenes. 4. Watch muted videos and describe what you see in English. This forces you to think visually rather than translate. One of my students, Maria, struggled with constant translation. I introduced her to visual thinking exercises. She started with simple images, labeling everything in her house in English. She'd look at objects and practice thinking their names directly in English. Within weeks, she noticed that basic words were coming to her mind in English first. No translation needed. A neuroscientist once said, "Neurons that fire together wire together." When you repeatedly connect images directly to English words, you're creating neural pathways that make thinking in English automatic. Visual thinking is powerful because it uses a different part of your brain than translation does. When you translate, you're using the language centers of your brain in a linear way. But visual thinking activates both the visual processing centers and language centers simultaneously, creating stronger, more direct connections. Let me share another exercise you can try today. The image stream technique. Scroll through photos on your phone or a website and describe each one in simple English sentences without pausing to translate. The key is immediacy. Don't give your brain time to switch languages. But visual thinking is just the beginning. There's another technique that builds on this foundation and takes your ability to think in English even further. It's about creating your inner voice in English, and we'll explore that in the next chapter. Chapter 3. Developing your English inner voice. We've discussed visual thinking as a foundation for breaking the translation habit. Now let's explore something even more powerful. Developing your English inner voice. What do I mean by inner voice? It's that constant stream of thoughts running through your mind all day. Right now, your inner voice probably speaks in your native language. But what if it could speak in English too? Why is this inner voice so important? Because we think to ourselves constantly, thousands of thoughts every day. If even some of these thoughts were in English, imagine how much practice you'd get. Think of it this way. When you speak aloud in English, you might practice for 30 minutes a day. But your inner voice is active for 16+ hours daily. If you could convert even 10% of that internal dialogue to English, you'd get hours of additional practice without any extra time commitment. So how do you start developing this English inner voice? Let me share some proven techniques. First, simple narration. Start describing your daily activities to yourself in English. When you wake up, think, "I'm getting out of bed. I'm brushing my teeth. I'm making coffee." These simple sentences might feel mechanical at first, but they're training your brain to process everyday thoughts in English. One of my students, Ahmed, practiced this technique during his morning routine. At first, it felt forced and slow, but after 2 weeks of consistent practice, these English thoughts started flowing more naturally. Within a month, he was thinking simple descriptions in English without effort. Second, Ask yourself questions in English. For example, what should I eat for lunch? Or, what will I wear today? Then answer these questions in English too. This creates a simple internal dialogue that strengthens your English thinking. Third, react to situations in English. When something good happens, think, "That's great," or "I'm so happy about this." When something challenging occurs, think, "This is difficult," or "I need to solve this problem." These emotional reactions in English create stronger memory connections. Here's a beautiful quote from Frank Smith. "One language sets you in a corridor for life. Two languages open every door along the way." When you develop your English inner voice, you're not just learning a language, you're creating a new way of experiencing the world. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but my thoughts are complex. I can't express everything in English yet. That's perfectly okay. Start with the thoughts you can express. Simple descriptions, basic reactions, essential questions. As your English improves, your inner voice will naturally become more sophisticated. The key is consistency. Set specific times during your day for English thinking practice. Maybe during your commute while exercising or before bed. Just 5 to 10 minutes of intentional English thinking several times daily will make a tremendous difference. One powerful technique is the thought switch. When you catch yourself thinking in your native language, simply switch mid-thought to English. This trains your brain to transition between languages and gradually makes English thinking more natural. Remember, developing your English inner voice isn't about eliminating your native language thoughts. It's about adding another dimension to your thinking. Your goal is bilingual thinking, the ability to think in either language when needed. I recommend starting with topics you're comfortable discussing in English. If you enjoy cooking, narrate your cooking process in English. If you love sports, describe the game to yourself in English. Using contexts where your vocabulary is strongest makes the transition easier. But what if you're just beginning and your vocabulary feels too limited? That's where our next technique comes in. In the next chapter, I'll show you how to use simple English to express complex thoughts, a method called chunking that makes thinking in English accessible at any level. Chapter 4. Thinking in chunks, not words. Speaking English fluently isn't about thinking of individual words. It's about thinking in meaningful chunks of language. This technique can transform how you process English in your mind. What exactly are chunks? They're natural word combinations that native speakers use without thinking. Phrases like, "by the way," "to be honest," "in my opinion," or "I'm not sure about that." These chunks are the building blocks of natural English. Why is thinking in chunks so powerful? Because it's how our brains naturally process language. When you think word by word, you're forcing your brain to work harder than necessary. But when you think in chunks, you're processing language the way it's meant to be processed. Let me explain with an example. Instead of thinking the individual words, "How are you doing today?" which requires 5 separate thoughts, you can think the single chunk, "How are you doing today?" This is much faster and feels more natural. So how do you start thinking in chunks instead of words? Let's break it down into practical steps. First, collect useful chunks. Start noticing common phrases in English conversations, movies, or podcasts. Write them down in a notebook or app. Focus on phrases you can use in everyday situations. Greetings, opinions, reactions, transitions. One of my students, Lee, created a digital flashcard deck with useful English chunks. She organized them by situation. At the restaurant, making small talk, giving opinions. This made it easy to practice chunks that go together. Second, practice whole phrases at once. Instead of saying good plus morning separately, practice thinking and saying good morning as one unit. Do this with all your collected chunks. The key is to practice them so often that they come to mind as a single unit, not as separate words. Third, use the substitution technique. Once you know a chunk like I'm thinking about, you can fill in different endings. I'm thinking about lunch, or I'm thinking about that movie. This lets you create many thoughts using the same familiar structure. There's a fascinating quote from Michael Lewis, a language expert. Language is not learned by piecing together individual words, but by learning chunks that can be retrieved completely from memory. This is exactly what I'm teaching you to do. Now, how can you practice thinking in chunks? Try this exercise. Pick 5 common situations from your day, like greeting people, ordering food, or asking questions. For each situation, learn 3 to 5 chunks that would be useful. Practice thinking these chunks until they come to mind automatically in those situations. Another effective technique is retelling. After watching a short video or reading a simple story, try to retell it to yourself, using English chunks you know. Don't worry about retelling every detail. Focus on using complete chunks naturally. Let me share a story about my student Carlos. He knew many individual English words, but always sounded unnatural because he was thinking word by word. We worked on chunk learning, and he started collecting phrases from his favourite English TV show. He practiced these chunks daily until they became automatic. Within 2 months, his English thinking became much more fluid because he was processing language in meaningful units. One thing to remember: thinking in chunks doesn't mean you can't be creative with language. Once chunks become automatic, you can mix and combine them in endless ways to express your unique thoughts. Think of chunks like building blocks. Individual words are like grains of sand, difficult to build with. But chunks are like bricks, solid, consistent units that fit together naturally to build something amazing. The magic of thinking in chunks is that it reduces your mental load. When chunks come to mind automatically, you free up mental energy to focus on your message rather than the language itself. This is when English starts to feel natural. But learning to think in chunks is just one piece of the puzzle. In our next chapter, we'll explore a technique that ties everything together: immersive mental challenges that train your brain to stay in English mode longer and handle real-world situations with confidence. Chapter 5. Mental Challenges. Training your brain to stay in English. So far, we've explored visual thinking, developing your English inner voice, and thinking in chunks. Now let's talk about something that really tests and strengthens these skills: mental challenges that keep your brain operating in English. What happens when most learners try to think in English? They do well for a few minutes, then their native language creeps back in. This is normal. But with specific mental challenges, you can train your brain to stay in English mode longer and handle more complex thinking. Think of these challenges like mental workouts. Just as physical exercise builds strength over time, these mental exercises build your ability to think in English naturally. Let's start with the 5-minute English Zone Challenge. Set a timer for just 5 minutes and commit to thinking only in English during that time. If your native language interrupts, gently redirect yourself back to English. As this becomes easier, gradually increase the time to 10, 15, or even 30 minutes. One of my students, Hiroshi, practiced this technique during his daily train commute. At first, he could only maintain English thinking for 3 to 4 minutes before his Japanese thoughts returned. But after consistent practice, he extended his English zone to his entire 25-minute commute. This dramatically improved his ability to think and respond in English. Another powerful challenge is the category sprint. Choose a category, like animals, foods, or jobs, and list as many items as you can in that category, thinking directly in English without translating. This trains your brain to access English vocabulary without going through your native language. Try the what-if challenge too. Ask yourself hypothetical questions in English. What if I could fly? What if I lived in London? Then answer these questions in English, stretching your ability to express more complex ideas and opinions. A personal favourite is the mental debate technique. Choose a simple topic and debate both sides in your head, entirely in English. For example, Is social media good or bad? Present arguments for both sides in your thoughts. This challenges you to think more deeply in English about complex topics. Here's a powerful quote from Charlemagne. To have another language is to possess a second soul. When you can debate ideas in your head in English, you're truly developing that second soul. For more advanced learners, try the explanation challenge. Pick an object or concept and explain how it works or what it means, all in your head, all in English. Start with simple things like how to make tea and progress to more complex explanations like how democracy works. My student Eleanor practiced this by explaining her job to an imaginary person each morning while getting ready. At first, her explanations were basic, but within months, she could mentally explain complex work processes in detailed English without hesitation. Remember, these mental challenges aren't about perfection. They're about pushing your boundaries and strengthening your English thinking muscles. It's normal to struggle or mix languages at first. The improvement comes from consistent practice and gentle persistence. One important tip: when your native language interrupts your English thinking, and it will, don't get frustrated. Simply notice it, then gently shift back to English. This non-judgmental awareness actually speeds up the learning process. What makes these mental challenges so effective is that they simulate the pressure of real conversations. In actual English discussions, you need to think quickly without translation time. These challenges create similar conditions in a safe, private environment. But here's where many learners go wrong. They practice speaking skills, but never practice thinking skills. By specifically targeting your thinking process with these challenges, you're addressing the root cause of hesitation and translation delays. Now that you've learned techniques to think in English, you might wonder, how do I actually implement all this in my daily life? English thinking naturally into your existing schedule. Chapter 6. Your Daily English Thinking Routine. We've covered powerful techniques for thinking in English, but knowledge without action won't change anything. In this chapter, I'll show you how to create a daily routine that makes English thinking a natural part of your life. The key to success isn't practicing for hours each day. It's about consistent strategic practice integrated into your existing routine. Even 10 to 15 minutes of focused practice daily will transform your ability to think in English over time. Let's create a practical daily routine that actually works. First, start your day with a morning English moment. Right after waking up, spend just 2 to 3 minutes thinking in English. Describe your plans for the day or how you slept. This sets an English foundation for your brain first thing in the morning. My student Javier turned his morning coffee ritual into English thinking time. While waiting for his coffee to brew, he'd plan his day in English. This simple 3-minute practice created a daily English thinking habit that required zero extra time in his busy schedule. Next, leverage transition times throughout your day. Waiting for the bus, standing in line at a store, cooking dinner. These small pockets of time are perfect for quick English thinking exercises. Use them for category sprints or to describe what you see around you. Another key practice is the topic of the day. Each morning, choose one simple topic like food, work, or weather. Throughout the day, whenever you think about this topic, switch to English. This creates a manageable focus rather than trying to think in English about everything at once. One of my students, Mia, used sticky notes with her daily topic written on them. She placed these notes on her desk, bathroom mirror, and refrigerator as reminders to think in English about that specific topic throughout the day. For many learners, bedtime offers a valuable opportunity for English thinking practice. As you're falling asleep, review your day in simple English sentences. Today I went to work. I had a meeting. I ate lunch with my friend. This peaceful practice reinforces English thinking and often leads to more English dreams over time. Here's a valuable insight from cognitive science. Habit stacking works better than creating entirely new habits. This means attaching English thinking to things you already do daily. For example, think in English while brushing your teeth, taking a shower, or commuting to work. Miguel, an accountant from Mexico, created his English thinking routine around his daily schedule. Morning shower. Describe his plans for the day. Commute. Practice the 5-minute English zone. Lunch break. Do a quick category sprint. Evening walk. Hold a mental debate. Bedtime. Review his day in English. By connecting these practices to existing activities, he made English thinking a natural part of his day without needing extra time. Use technology to support your routine. Set regular reminders on your phone that simply ask, "What are you thinking right now?" When you see this notification, switch your current thoughts to English. These pattern interrupts train your brain to toggle into English thinking mode. Track your progress to stay motivated. In a simple journal or app, note how long you can think in English before your native language interrupts, or how complex the thoughts you can express have become. Seeing your improvement will keep you consistent. Remember this quote from Aristotle: "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Thinking in English is exactly that, a habit that you can develop through consistent, deliberate practice. A final important note: be patient and kind with yourself. Learning to think in a new language is a significant neural change. Some days will be easier than others. When you struggle, simply acknowledge it without judgment and continue practicing. Every minute spent thinking in English is rewiring your brain, even when it feels difficult. Thank you for joining me today on Native Explorer. I hope this video has shown you that thinking in English isn't some mysterious talent that only certain people have. It's a skill that anyone can develop with the right approach. We've covered visual thinking to break the translation habit, developing your English inner voice, thinking in chunks instead of words, mental challenges to strengthen your English thinking, and creating a practical daily routine. The journey to thinking in English happens one thought at a time. Start small. Be consistent. Celebrate your progress. And remember, this process isn't just about language skills. When you learn to think in English, you're actually expanding your mind and how you experience the world. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with friends who are learning English. Subscribe to Native Explorer for more practical English learning tips and techniques. Your support helps me create more content to help learners around the world. What technique from today's video will you try first? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, your English thinking journey begins with a single thought. Why not make that thought today? Until next time, this is Native Explorer, helping you think, speak, and live in English naturally. Take care.